Hello and welcome to our round three weekly review show for the 2024 Guinness Men's Six Nations Championship here on the KLNS Rugby Podcast. After a fantastic weekend, we have an excellent panel ready to run over the highlights and some lowlights. Rejoining us this evening are two returnees in the form of Munster fan Eric Fitzgerald and Scots fan Craig Manson. Welcome back, lads.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to have three good games to kind of sink our teeth into with a lot of fairly dramatic moments, and always good to have a weekend where England are beaten. So
I mean,
Can't complain with that one.
no,
yeah,
absolutely not.
talk about playing to your audience right off the bat there. I love to see it. We do have four games. We'll have the Ireland under 20s at the bottom of the show as well. But just before we kick off proceedings, I'd like to remind our YouTube viewers you can listen to us on the go wherever you get your podcast. And while you're there, why not like, subscribe, tell a friend, whatever you feel like. Apparently, it makes a huge difference. But we will, as always, start with Ireland, start in Dublin, as Ireland continue their winning run with a clunky but comprehensive 31-7 victory over Wales, thanks to tries from Dan Sheehan, Ty Byrne, James Lowe, and Kieran Frawley, as well as 11 points from the boot of Munster young gun Jack Crowley. Eric, I'll start with yourself. It's 3 for 3 for Ireland on this slam quest. It was imperfect, but that's kind of par for the course when you're going on title charge, isn't it?
I think so, yeah, but I also think that to contextualize Ireland's run so far, we've played the three worst teams in the championship by some margin early doors. Like France are an absolute rabble this season in terms of how keenly they felt the loss of both Dupont and Michalak. I think like to lose one, they could have probably hacked that, but to lose the two of them has just proven to be catastrophic. And we saw that with like the way Jalibert played today. We saw that with how Luku has been playing all championship. I think as well with Italy, like, okay, they came within 3 points of England, albeit like Ioane's last minute try sort of put a gloss on things. And they drew with France today, which was absolutely, well, today at the time of recording, which was their best result ever in France. But at the same time, like they're in under a new coach, like Casada is trying to put his own stamp on things. They were missing a couple of key players through injury. In Dublin, if I recall. But this was definitely the most stuttery that we've seen Ireland look all championship. And I think part of that, I think there are two major reasons for that. I think number one, Wales picked a pack to target our set piece and to target our breakdown because obviously, like the core of what makes this Ireland team so successful is number one, kind of like sub three, even sub 2.5 second ruck speed to keep the ball going and to kind of keep the play going, and number two, a line out that is drastically improved from the World Cup and seems to be much more simplified. But Beard and Rowlands and even Wainwright as one of the kind of counter jumpers really kind of like made life difficult for Ireland on their own ball. I think it's the most I would wager comfortably that it's the most lineouts that we've lost in a game so far this championship on our
Yeah.
own throw. I would say I think as well, like the back row that they picked in, it was Wainwright, Jenkins, and help me out here. Who was that
Alex
blind side for them?
Alex Mann.
Alex Mann, yeah. That's such a read, like that's such a manager regen name. But I thought Daft Jenkins did particularly well. I thought Wainwright had a good game. I thought in particular in the back three, I thought Winnett and Dyer were excellent. And I thought so like kind of Wales' selection and how they targeted our game were one key component of that. And I also thought a second key component of it was as much as I'm delighted for him to make it, like to score a try on his competitive debut, um, I think Kieran Frawley had a few system hiccups in terms of where he was supposed to be in attack. I thought defensively he did very, very well under the high ball. I thought he returned a couple of balls with interest there from Wales. But I think in terms of like attacking organization, we just missed those one or two key moments. Like Hugo Keenan is one of those players that, like, because of his injury records and because of his like ubiquitous selection in the Ireland team. He's just one of those players that you don't actually realize how good he is until he's missing from your team. And I don't think it's like it would be unfair on Frawley to expect him to rise to the level of Keenan. But I think any team that's going to lose Hugo Keenan is a poorer team for it, be that Ireland or be that Leinster. Although, I don't think there's too much fucking difference between them these days, really.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And Craig, we mentioned Wales there because, like, to their credit, they went out. There was kind of an air of Mourinho, Chelsea off them. They were just there to make life as difficult as possible for Ireland. And they did put up a very spirited fight. So do you think Ireland's sluggishness was more that they did make life difficult for themselves, or were you impressed by the Welsh defence?
I think, and this is there's one player for Wales that people don't talk about regularly, although they have talked a little bit just in the lead up to this game, and that is Warren Gatland. I think he's well known, or his teams are well known to disrupt as much as they possibly can. They're not in a, he's managed to take a team that everyone has written off. Everyone is currently talking about the bin fire that is Welsh rugby, all the issues with how the guys are being paid, etc., etc. And he's managed to just instill a little bit of pride in them and try and put them together to at least defend what I think is a very strong Ireland team. And I think they put Ireland, as they always do, they put every team that comes up against them that are a stronger team than them, they put them off in some way. And I think with Ireland, it's given them a fairly strong defence. Set piece was a little bit here and there. I think with Porter up to his usual antics and a fairly inexperienced international prop up against him, he was able to along with I've forgotten I think it was O'Mahony that was on his side, covering up a few of the issues that Porter was giving the Welsh tight head. I think that gave dominance in the scrum to Ireland, and also Ireland's maul looked fantastic against Wales. So I think Gatland has managed to put these guys together. I think against if we go back to the scariest game I've ever been in attendance to at Wales, Scotland v Wales, he kind of gave them the ability to just go out and have a play while we were down to 14 men. I think they just seem to adapt to whatever they've got this grit inside them that they're going to come out and actually give you a scare. And I think that's what they've tried to do against Ireland. Unfortunately, Ireland being the sort of road roller that they are at this moment in time, they just couldn't get it completely. What's the word? They couldn't get them completely on the back foot. They always came back at them.
Yeah, and I think it was Jamie Roberts who said on ITV after the game, Ireland are the ultimate counter punch team. You can punch away, or you can just let them punch you. But ultimately, they're always the one who lands the killer blow. Like, and it's been a testament to them. And I think, like, I wrote about this in my piece yesterday on the Whistle. Like, patience is such a huge thing for that Irish team. Like, when Ireland get to phase 10, 12, 15, they look more likely to score than most other teams. Because you see the likes of, take Ty Byrne on the line that he took for his try. He still had two men outside him. It was almost indefensible for Wales at that stage. It was going to be either Lowe ships it onto Nash and they score in the corner, or Ty Byrne takes that hard line, they score, and Wales are already out in their feet. I think it was 45-minute ball and play time or something like that. Like, it was something insane. And that is testament to Ireland as well. And I thought Wales were really good. I think I seen Sam Costello made something like 15 tackles or something like that. Like, they certainly were not going to die without dying with their boots on, and that's credit to them. But Eric, I might just get back to you about Ireland's set piece, because Craig touched on it, you touched on it. The scrum was brilliant, fair enough. The line out probably felt like a bit of a wet patch at times, because there was a couple of ball transfer issues. There was a free kick conceded. There was two very obvious poor lifts at times and timing issues. So all in all, not ideal in that regard.
Not ideal, and I think you have to remember that, like, for one very important player at Ireland's set piece, like this was quite a strange and emotionally charged build up to this game. Like it was Tadhg Furlong's first game, in the Aviva since his father passed away back in December. Like you could see the emotion in him, during the national anthems. And I think, as much as he wants to go out and play there with pride, I think any performance driven by emotion will always have kind of some rough edges. And there was no doubt an element of distraction there that probably contributed to some of the wobbles in the set piece that you alluded to there, Kaelon. I also think the other thing as well is, while Ireland probably have the relatively least amount of transition, of all of the Six Nations teams this year, with the possible exception of Scotland. Um, we are still bringing in like important players into an important player into kind of like our lineup makeup, which is Joe McCarthy. And Joe McCarthy is like hugely physical, young man. Like, I mean, there's no question, I think, in my mind that he's supplanted like James Ryan as the starting tight head lock for Ireland, and will more than likely, I say, do so with Leinster next season when RG Snyman moves to them for a year before his inevitable departure to Bath. I got one Munster tangent in there.
Nice.
But I think there is still an element of the transition, and I honestly think, as I genuinely believe as well, that as the game went on, I think what we saw was a move away from a lot of the simpler lineups that Ireland have been running in the first two games of the season, and back to some of the complex, like, like that fairground game where you hide a ball underneath a cup, and you flip around the cups to try and find the ball.
Just don't
Going
say
on.
the word cutout, because from the Munster podcast we've banned that word because it has been the ire of my season.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely like, I think we reverted to type, and we panicked a small bit within the set piece. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't think, like you alluded to, kind of like Ireland's key quality there being patience. And I think particularly within the first 20 minutes when we were making a lot of mistakes where, people were cutting inside, or maybe balls should have gone out wide, and like passes weren't going to hand, or passes were being perhaps, a pop pass was perhaps being fired with too much force for the man coming onto it to make anything of it. I think we always just knew that we could kind of reset, go back to what we were good at, and pull on from there. And just in terms of set piece in the scrum, like, I mean, Craig alluded to, Andrew Porter's usual antics, and absolutely, like, I mean, Porter knows how to do one thing, and that is to bore in on his hooker on his side. But it's so simple about just painting a picture for referees, and like it's so reductive to boil it down into like elbow up, good, elbow down, bad. But that's exactly what it was for Andrea Piardi. Like it didn't matter what angle Porter was going in on Saturday, so long as he kept his elbow up, he basically got carte blanche to do anything. And on a broader note than that, like I was reffing two under 16s games over the last 2 weekends, one boys, one girls. And I honestly think that the way the scrum is being coached lately from like the grassroots up, it's all about power, and it's not about technique anymore. And I think
Yeah.
young props are being coached deliberately to just be like, okay, you bigger than the guy opposite you or the girl opposite you, just drive in them. Doesn't matter whether you go straight, doesn't matter how you bind, just drive in them, try and split them. And I think and look, I mean, Porter moved across from tight head. He's not a natural loose head. I think he's kind of almost trying to like short circuit or shortcut like parts of his game in order to be an effective loose head. But I really think that even with refs now, it has boiled down to a case of, okay, is he keeping his elbow up? Then he's probably fine. And I think for yesterday, and with PRD, Porter got away with that at set piece.
Yeah. And
I've got to say
go on.
that Piardi, one thing I have to say, and I may be what's the word, a bleeding heart here, but I think it was a Ty Byrne score, he couldn't tell he couldn't tell if the ball had been grounded or not, and his question was not try yes or no, or not this is a no, it's held up, can you prove it against it? The question was, I haven't seen it, I don't know. So does, I think it was Carl Dixon that was on on with them. I don't know. Can you have a look at it and tell me what you think? And this is where the refereeing decisions, no matter what it is, okay, I'm a bleeding heart Scot, and after today's game, I'm even more of a bleeding heart Scot, where we could have been now. But I just feel it's that the referees are becoming more and more important, and their questions are becoming more and more important. And actually saying I don't know is sometimes quite a good thing for a referee to do, especially when he's got he or she have got four incredible. They're part of the fourth incredibly qualified referees that are on a field, and they can, and there's nothing to ask a question. Painting a picture in a scrum has always been the biggest weapon of choice. You need to try and paint a good picture, and I think you're right regarding that. If you're painting the right picture, you're dominant in the scrum, you're going to get the scrum penalty. Very, very rarely, unless you've got Wayne Barnes refereeing you, are Ireland going to get pinged for it. You know.
Oh, that's true, and I've said it before about World Rugby's place in all this. I do feel like there are certain parts of the game where referees are just being hung out to dry, and when you look at disciplinary decisions, that's the number one example, because you've got, like, I'm trying to think of the most recent one to have been overturned, but like there's been a load of them this season, so we'll just take it as a broad point. Referees are being undermined the whole time, and like Piardi and Nick Berry and guys like this who mightn't have a perfect game, they only look worse because World Rugby will turn around then and be like, they'll tell the next guy, oh, well, do this or do that. And they're changing their mind every 2 weeks. And even, I don't know if you see it, Eric, but like with the new tackle height things, referees, I've heard, have been told so many things over the last season that the tackle height thing has just become 10th on the list when it was supposed to be a major clampdown. And, it depends obviously on who your manager is, but there is this element of just they are one isolated person who are being told to watch out for 15 things in a game, and eventually you will miss a certain number. And like, I feel like PR did a good game yesterday, to his credit. I'm not his biggest fan, but like, don't have anything against him. But I think he had a good game as well. And just to kind of get back on track a small bit, Craig, I'll throw this one to you, because Ireland they're 3 from 3. They're probably the most impressive side in it so far, but I do like to get people's perspective on them on a wider level. What have you made of Ireland's start? Not just this game, but the other 2 games as well.
I think Ireland are just showing themselves to be currently the team we expect them to be right now, and that is at the top of their game. I think you're very much there in the Premier League, and the rest of the teams in the Six Nations are currently in the Championship. They are a big team to. They seem, you hit a good point earlier on regarding the phase play that they have. There's no 4 phases and then either something goes wrong or the other team gets their hands on the ball, or it's a turnover penalty or something like that. They go through 10 phases, stop, then go through another 10 phases, and they seem to be relentless at this moment in time. So I think whether we can argue or talk about different players' skill levels, I think it's more of we laugh about it, we call it the Borg, but we call them the Borg, and there's a Star Trek reference for you to show you how much of a geek I am. But they're very they're constantly at you. They will constantly come at you, and I think there's times that they use the breakdown to their advantage. There's a lot of times that the Ireland are illegal at the breakdown, but because of the way they're painting the game and they're painting the breakdown, they don't get away with it. I'm not trying to be rude about this. They paint a certain picture so that the referees don't ping them for it. I think I've forgotten the young lad's name, McCarthy. I think he was very borderline in this last game. There was a lot of things he was doing that could have been, if he got a different referee, that he may have been pinged a little bit more. But I think just at this moment in time, I think relentless is probably the word, and it's going to be, something's going to have to happen, and they're going to have to, because sorry, I'm going on a little bit, but they've got, we've taken out Johnny Sexton, and now they've brought in two young lads. Well, Crowley, he's not that young. He's been playing a fair bit of time with, it's Munster, isn't he? Crowley
He is, yep.
That he's playing well, but he's just fitted in straight away. Whereas you've got players from Leinster who everyone thought, oh, they're just going to walk in because Sexton, they're going to be the natural replacement for Sexton. He's come in and they're just as relentless. So I think it's just I can't put my finger on it. All I can say is that as a Scot and as other teams that we've talked to, I was with a lot of the Welsh sort of contingent when I was down at Wales. They are the word relentless just keeps coming up for Ireland, and we have to try and put a stick in the spokes somehow. And we don't know how big the stick is going to have to be, but it's going to have to do something,
Yeah, I think in terms of kind of that relentlessness that you talked about there, Craig, I mean, two things is like number one, like good teams are built on like two things. I think number one is momentum, and I think like momentum just doesn't just feed into results. It feeds into like how quickly top teams can hit top gear and create a pace that opposition just can't live with. And I think Ireland are really, really good at like all of a sudden ending up in fifth gear, and the opposition are kind of thinking like, oh shit, how did we get here? Because like even for Wales, I feel like, that purple patch that they had at the beginning of the second half where Tyke Byrne ended up getting sin binned and they got their penalty try, and they thought like, shit, we're 17-7, we might actually be onto something here. And there was one point in that half where Costello kicked into the corner instead of going for three. And I was kind of like, why didn't you go for three? You'd have been within 7 points then, like, and you can
Yeah.
just keep kind of
They did
ticking
that
over.
twice. They did that in the first half as well. At 17-0 down, they had a kick in front of the post, and it did feel like just take the points and go back, and you might just get 3 more points before halftime.
Yeah, and like that's as much as an important part of building momentum in a game as it is with especially when you're playing against a team like Ireland. And I thought it was so important there for Wales to take their chances, and every single time they seem to just spurn that opportunity. And then like obviously as the game goes on and the results starts to slip away from them more and more, they're obviously going to recalibrate and set themselves different goals of like, okay, let's try and get out of here with a losing bonus point, or let's try and deny Ireland the try bonus point. And then at the end, when Byrne went over for the fourth and final try with literally like the last play of the match, I was delighted for him because number one, it's Tyke Byrne and he's a legend. Number two, it meant we got the try bonus point. But you could just see Welsh heads completely drop as if to say like, "Ah, fuck, here we go again." Like, we tried to throw everything at this crowd. And it didn't stick. Like in terms of kind of, you were talking about, Sexton goes out and Crowley comes in. Like Crowley feels like he's been around for ages, but he's only 24.
Yeah.
And then you look at kind of opposite him, you had Sam Costello, who's 22, and was it Lloyd or Evans was on the bench then for Wales. Either way, like you're talking about a similar age profile, like Lloyd is 22, Evans is 24. And Jack, like, it's so hard to believe that this is only his third Six Nations start, because he looks to the manner born in terms of just like the confidence that he plays with. And I think in particular with him, he offers much more of a varied game than Sexton would have done in the past, in the sense of like Crowley is genuinely, when he gets that close to the line, he must be a nightmare to defend against, because he's capable of breaking. He's capable of passing literally at the last millisecond to send someone away into a gap. And we
Like
saw that,
like
like
for the low try.
like for the low
Mm.
try, like for the Burn try down in Marseille in the first game of the championship. And he must be an absolute nightmare to defend against. And I think what you can see as well is that he's much more of an on ball out half, as opposed to say like a set piece out half like Sexton was. And I think you can start to see Ireland's game gradually shifting this season more and more away from like the counter transition, kick the leather off the ball style that we used to play, and more onto that like continuous phase play, on-ball rugby, like that period of on-ball rugby that you referred to there, Kaelan, where the ball was in play for, I'd say, a good 7 minutes.
It was 7 minutes, and it starts with Tyburn in the bin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
And like the Welsh players were out on their feet,
yeah,
and the Irish player, like Josh Adams, looked like he was going to have to be carted off. And the Irish players were up, and they were looking for more, and they were looking for hunger. They were hungry. They were really, really looking for that. I think one thing to kind of call out about this Welsh team as well, right? I was going through the entire squad that they selected for the Six Nations. There's only 4 players north of 30 in that squad.
yeah.
They have such a young squad, and again, like Craig, you were referencing the Borg and Star Trek. Like, I'll introduce another sci-fi reference here and say that like the Welsh team feels a bit like it's like Logan's Run at the moment. That a player in camp, they're the gem in their hand turns color when they turn 31 or 32, and Gatlin puts the arm around them, and they go off to live with a farm with a nice family on a farm somewhere.
Well, I've seen Dan Bigger's house on Netflix. I think that's what's happened to him. He's
Yeah,
been sent off to the beautiful place.
yeah,
But that's what cost them last week. Then like that's where I don't know if we got to talk about last week, but I certainly did with another podcast I was on. Like, if Dan Bigger is on that pitch against England, they probably get the job done. Now, granted, maybe not the Dan Bigger who's played this season, but Dan Bigger in general for Wales that was at the World Cup, they probably get the job done. And I think it's part of their learning curve. I think it's part of Costello's learning curve. I thought he was really, really good yesterday. Yeah, he made a couple of mistakes, but like for a 22-year-old out half in his first second Six Nations start against one of the best Six Nations teams of all time, in according to almost every metric, yeah, he did a fine job. And I'm not disappointed with Wales. I'm not mad at Wales. Like, I feel like they're probably surpassing most people's expectations so far. Granted, everyone's expectations were on the floor, but like that was still the expectation because people looked at the squad and rolled their eyes and said, "That's it." Like they're getting the wooden spoon. But like, if they beat France in 2 weeks' time, would I be surprised? No. Like,
No,
genuinely, I would not be
I
surprised.
agree with you.
Now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
gonna take 80 minutes of, to use that word again, sheer relentlessness, just being an absolute pain in the hole for 80 minutes. But that's what Wales do in Cardiff for years. And that's what they're best at. And it's a nice segue because we're going to move on to the Calcutta Cup. And if there's ever been a pain in the hole in England's side for the last couple of years, it's the man Duhan van der Merwe. His hat trick, Craig, is starting to break out into smiles and laughter now at this stage. His hat trick, crucial as they took down England 30-21. It's 4 consecutive Calcutta Cups. I think it was 1892, Craig, the last time they did it. And to use the anthem, when we see the likes again, it's a truly special win for Scotland yesterday, and probably fitting after what happened in round two.
Yeah, and I think we've. I'm going to say this, and I'm now then concerned about the next game against Italy. But I think we're actually showing ourselves all of the things that everyone has talked about Scotland over the last 4 years has come together in that game. We showed some control. We kept our skill level high, our penalty count a little bit lower. We kept on when England put that really nice purple patch right at the beginning of the game for Furbank's try, we didn't panic like we usually do, and we didn't doubt ourselves. Came back, moved on, and away we went. I think obviously there was a lot talked about their new blitz defence, their Springbok blitz defence, and how it's this is going to solve the problems, and they're going to get the Grand Slam because of this blitz defence. And as we all know, or certainly when I'm coaching defence, you may have a blitz defence in the middle, but you want a softer defence on the outside. And unfortunately, putting all your eggs in one basket, and I'm going to, Duhan van der Merwe was on the end of a couple of fantastic balls. I think if that was Darcy Graham, or even Kyle Steyn, they probably would have gone round the same way. especially that try that he scored. He ran round the outside when the ball came off the England player, and it came to him. I think that was maybe his sheer power that got that. He managed to run through the tackle, but I think, for example, that kick through for the last try, that could have been Stein or Darcy Graham, or so I think there's been a lot being said about Duhan van der Merwe, and there's a lot being said about Duhan van der Merwe, especially from our friends, both east from you and from south from us. And I think, yes, he is a fantastic player. We have done a huge amount. He's done a huge amount for Scotland, but Scotland have put a huge amount into him as well. And I think he's as he's testified to, he's resurrected his career with us, and I think he's doing a fantastic job. But I think you have to look at where Scotland were with this game. They managed to win dominance with their pack. They scored a couple of they would hit the ball up well, protected the ball very well as well. There wasn't very many turnover penalties. England tried their best to give us some turnover, to get turnover off us, but funnily enough, they were the ones that were knocking the ball on more and giving us more ball. I think it was more of a complete performance to give Duhan the end of the chain, if you know what I mean.
It certainly was a more complete Scottish performance than we've seen. And I think I made this comment to someone maybe yesterday or whatever. Like, the first game felt like old Scotland. The second game felt like old Scotland in a different way. And this one just felt like this is where they're trying to get to. And I do think they're evolving. And we might get onto that in a minute, but England were the other side, and all the talk about Scotland, but we do have to talk about England as well. And Eric, like, yesterday probably proved us right. And I know we talked about this beforehand. Once you knock them off script, they kind of have a tendency still to fall like a stack of cards. And it more than likely it's just because they're evolving into a new team and they're trying to bed in new systems, but they're still very flappable.
They are, and I think like England rely, and England historically have relied, particularly under this like off-ball kick pressure game that they're playing under Borthwick. They rely so much on forward dominance, and they rely so much on structure and everyone doing their job. And I think what Scotland did was kind of like play them at their own game in a lot of certain ways and try and force scrappy situations where errors could happen. Like, I think of, Cameron Redpath's break after that knock on. I think, there was a particular bad sequence in the second half where like Jamie George failed to get his hands on a loose ball and then ended up like kind of kicking it back and losing even more yards. And I think the key thing as well, like, we've talked about transition an awful lot in the context of this Six Nations. And I think England went from kind of like Steve Borthwick being there in case of emergency break glass coach heading into the Rugby World Cup and after Jones left. And there was a lot of talk that like, oh, England were only using the Six Nations as like an extended fitness training session, and you'll see now, like England will really come good in the World Cup. And of course, England, being the jammy bollocks as they are, did in England in the World Cup and ended up in a third place playoff. But I think like losing Sinfield and bringing in Jones, like, I mean, I think Jones is an excellent defensive coach, but it's going to take time for that system to bed in. Like, they are in a period of transition there, and they're in a huge period of transition in terms of personnel. But I think the biggest problem with their transition of personnel is that Borthwick, like, whereas Wales have kind of, as I said, done that Logan's Run thing of like, you're above the age of 30, get the hell out of here. Like, England have kind of halfway housed it a little bit, because you have a bench that has the likes of Chandler Cunningham South and Emmanuel Faye Waboso, who scored a fantastic try when he came on. Like, let's not forget, ran a great line for his score. And like, they're cycling in a lot of the Northampton players based on Northampton's form in the Premiership right now, and the likes of Tommy Freeman and Finn Smith on the bench and everything like that. And they've decided to dispense with the likes of Owen Farrell, etc. But then you have like 37-year-old Dan Cole still packing down a tight head. Like, great scrummager, don't get me wrong. You have Jamie George captain the side when I wonder, like, would it have been a more of a breath of fresh air for England to have started with the likes of Theo Dan, who's looked really good when he's come off the bench in any of the games and looks like a properly solid player. Like even at scrum half, what does Danny Kerr offer at this level anymore that Ben Spencer couldn't? And Ben Spencer's part of a good Bath team as well. So I just think with Borthwick, he's kind of trying to halfway house it between he doesn't want to go a full clear of the decks like Wales did, but as a result, then he's completely lopsiding it by bringing in the likes of like Cunningham South, who was only under 20s last year, if I recall correctly,
Yeah.
and he can't seem to make his mind up about like the actual path that he wants to take there. And I think similarly as well, Craig spoke there about like coaching the blitz defense. Like they were grand up the middle, but as you said, Kaelon, the second they got knocked off, like the need for structure, the need to do things on their own terms, and the second the ball got loose or scrappy or whatever, Scotland were on top, and that's not surprising when you have when you have kind of like a lot of Glasgow players in there because they're also quite comfortable as a team with loose ball. And also I think just the Calcutta Cup element cannot be discounted. Like I think Scotland get themselves up so well for Calcutta Cup games in recent memory, and it's like somebody flicks a switch in Duhan van der Merwe whenever he plays against England that turns him from a really good player into the best winger in the world. We remember his wonder try against England in the Six Nations last year. Like he scored three great tries here again this year. And like that Calcutta Cup element in Murrayfield can't be discounted as well in terms of like, that the atmosphere in Murrayfield is always fantastic for games. It's extra special for Calcutta Cup games. It's amazing the amount of teams that get their atmosphere up when England rock up into town, isn't it? But it reminds me of that. I don't know if you remember that advertisement that got pulled for rugby coverage on BBC, where it was like every supporter of every team was asked who's the team they most enjoy beating, and every supporter that wasn't English said England. Um, but yeah, I think just again, like this is a term that we're going to come back to again and again, like when we talk about France, when we talk about Italy, like transition is a big part of what England are doing here now. They're still transitioning from Jones to Borthwick. They're trying to cycle in new players, although I think they're going a bit too gung-ho about it with the age profile of some of the guys they're keeping and with some of the as bringing in, and also with some of the guys they're keeping that perhaps should be sunsetted out of their roles. And I think with Jones coming in as their defensive coach, like while I think next season, I do believe that England's defence will be quite formidable. We are just starting to see the signs of a team that still hasn't 100% got to grips with a new defensive system this year.
And I know it's very lazy punditry to say it, but you do get the sense of England as well, where there's a little bit of not saying like they don't believe. I do think they believe in each other, but because they're so easily almost rattled and pushed off it, and kind of there is kind of that sense that the heads go down. It's like, oh shit, here we go again, because they have been going through this for about what 3 years now at this stage, where it's been games like this where they look all right and then they get knocked off, and then nothing works for them. And maybe like I know a lot of people were high praise on George Ford after the first two rounds, or of the likes of Marler, George, guys like that, but maybe there is a lack of leadership. Maybe the halfway house thing from Borthwick is the issue. But ultimately, when you are in transition, there's going to be so many things you could point to, and realistically, that is the big one, and it will be the big one, as we said, for France and Italy when we get on to them. But Craig, I might just finish with yourself because we mentioned transition again. But Scotland certainly feel like they're evolving. Like yes, they scored three insanely good tries, two of them insanely good in terms of one was structured brilliance, the other one was unstructured magic from Finn Russell. So often we've said that. But now they are very kick heavy. They're very off ball. Do you feel like it is a good natural progression for Scotland to move this way? Do you feel like it is something that will work?
I think there's two things going in Scotland's favour. They have been playing together. If you look at, we on our podcast that we have, we have the team's been announced. Let's talk about the team, or let's talk about who we think's going to be in the team before the team announcement has happened. and you can pretty much tell the team straight off, because this team has been together quite for some time. So they're starting to, God, I keep saying this, they're starting to gel a little bit, and they're showing progression. I think they should have shown a lot more progression far quicker than now. But I think they're starting to believe that they can do things together. Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones, are playing together regularly, so they're getting good forward motion. They're finding spaces, etc. That little tip on from Tuipulotu to Hugh Jones for the first try was just sublime. But that's knowing your 12-13 combo, knowing each other incredibly well. Again, once Tuipulotu had gone off, you bring on Cammy Redpath, who's been playing with Finn Russell at Bath. It's a familiarisation. You look at, I thought we were more dangerous when at that at that point when we've got we've got a front row that's been playing a lot together. So you've got Schumann, you've got Turner, you've got Xander Fagerson. However, I would say that Miller Mills has surprised everyone. He had a very good game off the bench. His first little period of time that he came on for Xander Fagerson, when he went off for a head check, he showed his nerves, but actually when he came back on, he was very, very good. I think it's just, I honestly, I could get drawn into it and tell you, yes, we're building, and Ireland better look out because, we're coming for them and this, that, and the other. And then we go to Italy and we lose, So it's just one of those situations where we have to be incredibly careful what we say, how we act, etc. But I think with Finn Russell as captain, I think he's getting his way a lot more. And I think actually everyone's buying in a lot more. Whereas when it was Townsend, it was basically he had players on the field that were selling the Townsend way and didn't involve Finn. That's when we were finding ourselves in a little bit of problems, and there was that sort of juxtaposition between Finn Russell and the rest of the team. So I think we've kind of solved that issue, and I think we're moving forward. So fingers crossed. Let's just hope we don't get complacent against Italy like we did with Wales, and they come and bite us back in the second half.
I think you raise a very good point there about kind of like the détente that exists now between Tooney and Finn in terms of the benefit that Scotland are reaping from it. And I suppose my question for you then, Craig, is like, okay, 3 weeks is a long time in rugby and it's an even longer time in the Six Nations. But looking ahead to that game in Dublin on the St. Patrick's weekend, like, do you think Scotland have it within them to be party poopers and to potentially get a win on the road in Dublin?
I honestly, right now, I don't think so. I think everything's in Ireland's. Ireland are playing incredibly well at an incredibly high level. It's also at the Aviva, so you're going to have the majority of the crowd there. Scotland thrive on their fans, and we showed that in Wales. There wasn't a lot of us in Wales, and we were fairly loud in the first half, but the second half we were concerned. And the big issue we have, and is in defence, as you talked about with transition. If we say, you got Ty Byrne goes through a gap and gets maybe 3 or 4 yards, he goes to ground, 2 people are in, Gibson Park picks the ball up, takes 2 steps, puts it to someone else, takes another 6 yards off us. That panic defence or that scramble defence that we have, that's when we give away penalties. And that's when we're on the back foot. That's when Ireland kick to the corner, then they come in and there's more pressure on us. And I think that's our biggest feeling is this. When we're in scramble defence, it seems to be that we overplay. Jamie Ritchie maybe overplays and tries to go for a ball that he can't get to, gives away a penalty. We just seem to. It's not mentally folding. It's more the fact that we're just under so much pressure when it comes to that everyone decides to do their own thing and causes more trouble than actually playing as a team. That is, Edinburgh do it on a regular basis. Glasgow have kind of knocked it away. They seem to be okay in panic defence, but Edinburgh fold regularly when they're put under pressure. If you're getting go forward ball, if they've got a dominant hit at the gain line, so if Bern comes at us and we put him on his backside, like we did with England this weekend, there was dominant hit after dominant hit. It's almost like we believe our own hype and we move on, and we go for those turnover balls, or the team that's coming at us knocks the ball on. So that's my only concern, that currently, as we've talked about, Ireland are relentless when it comes to phase play, and where I worry our defence will fold under that relentless. And we'll get, it's not so much they'll fold, they'll give away penalties, and that just gives you the opportunity to march up the field.
Yeah, I get it. And I suppose one more question that I have for you as well, Craig. Sorry, Caelan, I know it's your podcast and I know you're hosting. But Finn Russell. So obviously, like, Finn, when he's great, he's great. When he's bad, he can be pretty horrid, but he seems to be having more of the great performances than the horrid performances in this year's Six Nations. I suppose question is it seems like Scotland are nearly afraid to take him off for long periods of time. Like Ben Healy got only a very, very small cameo against England there at the weekend, and if I remember correctly, didn't feature much against either Wales or France either. And
didn't
obviously
come off the bench in the first two games.
He hasn't featured at all.
Yeah. He hasn't featured at all, and myself and Caelan are obviously biased with Ben Healy, given that he's a former Munster man, and definitely disappointed to see him not featuring in green, but delighted to see him playing international rugby. Is that the fear there? I suppose looking at that, it kind of reminds me of like what Ireland were like with Sexton, where we were so scared to take someone else off the bench. And it goes like, to use an American football analogy, there was an old story about Peyton Manning in training for, I think it was the Broncos, and a coach asked, like, what do we do if Peyton goes down? And a coach replies, if Peyton goes down, we're fucked, and we don't practice fucked. And it kind of feels like with Scotland right now, that if Finn goes down, we're fucked and we don't practice fucked. Like, what do you think there is an over reliance on Finn, or a reluctance to maybe cycle in Healy for more minutes?
I think the big issue is very similar to what you've just mentioned with Johnny Sexton. I think Finn is a talisman. He's got better and better as he went to France, and now he's gone to Bath. Finn's a confidence player. If you turn the attack over to Finn and say to him, "It's all yours, you do it," and which, okay, I might be being rude to the Bath attack coach and also Tooney, but when Finn is left to crack on, and I think this is where the big difference with him this season has been, is he is captain for Scotland. He's able to run the ship. Nobody's doubting him. There's no question marks over him. There's no hoo-ha. There's everything seems to be positive at this moment in time. So he's riding on that wave, and he's able to do, even if he does kick a couple of kicks that hit off, that don't go through between, through the gap and hit off a defending player. Nothing's phasing him. For me, you can't take him off, because unfortunately, and I love Healy. I thought Healy we won a watch when we got him, but he's been off colour with Edinburgh for the last wee while, and he's been missing his kicks. But on the other side of things, we've got I'm going back to club rugby. We've got Emiliano Boffelli, who is 90% kicker, and he's not even getting the opportunity to step up for Edinburgh. It's always Healy gets the ball, Healy's going to kick it, and he has missed quite a lot of kicks within. In fact, he's probably cost us games is the wrong thing, but the points total that Edinburgh could have had if he'd hit his kicks, we probably would have won a couple of more games. So you've got him almost on a, how can I put it, on a little bit downward. And so if you've got Finn Russell, who's at the height of his powers just now, very close to, I'll be a typical loud-eyed Scotsman. Finn Russell's probably one of the best 10s in the world at this moment, if not the best 10 in the world right now. You have you have everyone around you on that same playbook, as in the fans, the press, the team players, etc., are all on that same path. You take him off and put Healy on, there's two things going to happen. Healy's either going to have a good game, but the hoo-ha's going to be about Finn Russell being taken off, or Healy's going to have a bad game and he's going to be destroyed. And I don't want that for the guy, because he's put his hat in the ring. I'm going with Scotland. I'm going to play for Scotland. He needs to be brought on. However, to go back to your original point, he needs game time and he needs to play international rugby, because if he doesn't play international rugby, how does he learn? So it's a really difficult balance to have. I'm disappointed. George Horn went through the same situation with Townsend a few years ago, where he was on the bench for, even against Italy, for example, he wasn't brought on. He's standing. I remember sitting in the because I'm lucky enough to know George quite well. He comes from my club, so, and I was watching him. He's at the sidelines throwing the ball in the air, just waiting to get on, and he never got on. And Townsend seems to go down that route of, if a game starts getting close, he doesn't bring on anyone. But unfortunately, Healy, for example, against Edinburgh and also against France, I think he brought on virtually everybody else and didn't bring Healy on. So I don't know what's going on there, and I really, it's a concern. Okay, Finn's the captain, but we've got two captains. We've got a co-captain in Rory Darge, but I think Darge had been taken off by that point. So it's a difficult situation to be in, but I don't think it's right. I think it needs to be, we've invested in Healy. We've told him that he's going to come over and play for Scotland. Why aren't we using him?
Because really, I suppose beyond, but like Healy and Russell are the only two out halves in the squad, and your only option kind of beyond that then really is, like, you're not going to call up Duncan Weir again, as much as Duncan Weir is a long-standing servant of Scottish rugby, but like your next option really there is Ross Thompson, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, but this is again.
I think Tom Jordan will have qualified by the autumn internationals.
Yes, he will have. He will
Yeah.
have. But you've got this situation where, and this is the Blair Kinghorn experiment. You've then got that situation where you stick Kyle Rowe on the bench. If Healy's not going to, if one of them's injured, Healy or Finn Russell, Blair Kinghorn's going to cover your 10. And I'm a convert with Blair Kinghorn, although, however, I would say he has become a far, far, far better fullback now that that everyone's decided he's a fullback, and that's what's going to happen, or the experiment's over. But I think that's Hastings was the more natural. You would see Hastings and Finn Russell getting game time together a lot, because Hastings has got that little bit of Finn Russell magic in him too. He's got the ability to kick the ball into space. He's got the ability to put flat passes, and he's a little bit more of a maverick. But you don't really you don't see that from Healy. Healy's more of he's got a fantastic boot on him when it's working. He's very metronomic. And also he's a bit like Kinghorn. He's a big lad, so he's happy to take the ball to the line and get the ball around the back of players, etc. So it's a really difficult situation. I can't really answer your question. I've talked quite long without actually answering your question as such, but I think it's wrong that Healy's on the. For me, as an international players, if they're on the bench, they get on and they get 10 minutes at least. And I think it was something that we should have happened.
I think that kind of sums up podcasts in general. I've talked for a while, but I haven't really answered your question.
Yeah.
I just think it's ironic how everything that Craig said has been like, you could really relate this to Ireland, be it 2024 Ireland, 2021 Ireland, like you said there, I don't want to see the young lad be crushed after putting his hand up. I mean, if we ever get to a stage where Dan Parks is tweeting the apprenticeship is over for Ross Thompson, then we know you've come full Ireland about it. Like, but and then at the same time, this is groundbreaking. This is the first Irish podcast to ever compare Finn and Johnny Sexton in a positive light together and say they're the exact same.
I was going to say, at least Scotland didn't create an entire fucking tour down to South Africa just so Blair Kinghorn could get some minutes of 10.
Hey, we bet the Greek was like not many people could say that, you know.
I would also say that the mind you, I don't think he was there, but they didn't have the camera panning every time there was a break in the game to see what Stuart Hogg was looking like when he was watching the thing. You know, every time they went to Johnny Sexton, what they expect in Johnny Sexton to be happy, sad, angry, shaking his fist. It's like the guy's retired. Let him go, you know.
I
No one
100%
sex,
agree.
no one Sexton angry was probably going to be the default reaction anyway.
Well,
So
there's that, yeah.
We will move on to Lille because speaking of angry, I think we all are a small bit not well, slightly angry, mainly disappointed because although Italy played a historic draw thanks to an Ange Capuzzo try laid on, they were denied by the wits of the post by some lap of the gods misfortune and so on. Craig, I'll start with you again. I feel like everyone is heartbroken, but we'll start with the positives. It's another result that shows how far Italy have come, especially when you take into consideration they had England, historically their toughest opponent, Ireland, historically their second toughest opponent, and France away, who they'd never won to start a new coach's era.
Yeah. My problem is that Italy are still relying on, you know, they apart from Wales, who they probably beat in the last minutes, but you know, every time they seem to have a good game or a better game, something's gone on. So there's a yellow card or there's a red card or you know, they leave it again. They thankfully it looks like they've got fitter and they're looking more professional. I have arguments regularly with John Anderson on our podcast because he still thinks that Italy and the two URC teams are absolutely bobbins. But for me, they're growing slowly. I think Franco Smith started it with bringing in Garbisi at a very young age into Benetton, and I think they've grown and grown and grown. They've taken a few things out of our books, out of Scotland's book, and they're starting to look around in different parts of the world for different players to bring into Italy to play. And I think that the finally, I guess, can we say it's Conor O'Shea has started the revolution all those years back, and I think he's put in some fantastic building blocks. So I honestly think that Italy are finally at a point where you're not going to point at Georgia and say, well, we should get rid of Italy and bring Georgia in because Italy are just wooden spoon candidates all the time. They are, however, prone to brain farts. Their skill levels just aren't there yet. But I tell you that, you know, give them another couple of years, I think they're going to frighten a lot of teams.
Yeah. And Eric, in true Irish media podcast fashion, we're giving the team in blue. Well, sorry, they're in white this time, but you take my point. The team in blue, the belly rubs, and the other team are being given the the kick up the ass because you can't help but imagine that Fabien Galtier isn't under severe pressure now because they should really. I know sport doesn't work like this, but you feel like they should really be 0-3 by now.
I think it's mad. Yeah, they really should. And I think the thing about like France this season is that they will point to the disruption of the injury to their starting halfback pairing, because I think the drop off in quality from Dupont and Entamac to Luku and Jalibert is just absolutely massive. Like you saw cracks appearing in the World Cup with Jalibert at 10, not necessarily being the best option in that system. But a lot of those were papered over by Dupont just doing mad Dupont shit for most of the matches that France played in. And like, you know, coming back, like doing some weird cyborg stuff. You know, we were talking about the Borg earlier. Like Dupont was definitely part of the collective coming back from that for that quarter final against South Africa to with his broken cheekbone. I think talking about the concept of belly rubs there though, Kaelon, like I think the last people to be giving themselves belly rubs about this will be the Italy side. Like Gonzalo Caseda, one of the best out halves to ever play for Argentina, seriously competitive coach with a good track record. They're going to be absolutely gutted that they're not coming away from Lille with the win. And I also think they're going to be fuming at the officiating, to be honest with you, because as soon as that French player started to charge down Garbisi's penalty when the ball fell over, the referee should have blown for a penalty, should have marched Garbisi 10 yards forward, should have marched the T marker rather 10 yards forward. And there's no question in my mind that Garbisi would have nailed it from there. Um, France again, like, a side that are going into transition in the sense that, like, Labite has cycled out as their attacks coach and Arletaz is in instead. But you're bringing in a new attacks coach with a halfback pairing that ultimately isn't going to be your starting halfback pairing. And also your inside centre, Jonathan Danty, who's so crucial to a lot of the great work that France were doing. His form has just fallen off a cliff. And it's no surprise because he's part of a La Rochelle team that are like just stinking up the joint this year, both in the top 14 and in some of their performances in Europe as well. And you see a lot of guys there that are kind of on borrowed time. Like Cyril Boy has been having a terrible championship. Um, like I mentioned Dante there, I mentioned their halfbacks. Um, like, even what you call him, Damien Penaud, who normally looks like an absolute world beater, has looked very off the boil in for a good portions of the game that for the games that France have played in the tournament so far this year. The other thing as well is I think we were talking about the idea of like, England cycling in the likes of Cunningham South and like previous under 20s players. Like France called up Posolo Tuliagi from their under 20 squad this year. And to be honest with you, yes, he's a big physical unit. He'll throw himself into rucks and stuff like that. But he plays with the rough edges of a young fella who you called up from the under 20 squad.
Yeah.
And I think it's mad, and I actually think it's insulting to Italy to throw him in for his first start and to think that Italy are the kind of team against which you can do that. Um, but I think in terms of where Italy are right now, and like, they'll be fuming, but like I think they got their selection right today. I think Italy are at their weakest when Stephen Varney is starting at scrum half for them. I do think he's the worst of the three scrum halves currently in their squad.
Adriano
Um,
seemed to have a good game today, and Garbisi in week 1 as well seemed to have a good game.
this is it. And like I think as well, like you look at that back line, like of the back three of Ioane, Menoncello, and Capozzo, like that's a phenomenal back three combo. Craig was talking there about the Italian teams in the URC, and yeah, Zebre are absolute bobbins. Yeah, I would completely agree with that statement, even though they're currently in 13th ahead of two Welsh teams. But
Get that in
Benetton,
there.
but I would honestly expect Benetton to have a home quarterfinal in the
Yeah.
URC playoffs this year. I think they've been fantastic. And I think when you look at the Italy under 20s that are coming up, like, it's a very, very common refrain in Ireland, and it's one that I agree with, and it's one that Craig alluded to there. Like, this is where we're finally starting to see Conor O'Shea going into the grassroots in Italy, going in like setting up structures that are reaping dividends, and like, okay, they're still relying on, like calling up the likes of Louis Lina. Matt Gallagher is going to be joining Benetton from Bath next season, and he's Italian qualified as well. You have like the aforementioned Varney, you have Ross Vincent, yeah, Ioane is like Monte Ioane. You have players like that are in that team, but at the same time, like, you look at the likes of admittedly French born, but came up through the Italian system, Capozzo. You look at the likes of the Canone brothers, who are fantastic players. You look at the likes of the two Garbisi brothers at the halfbacks. Federico Ruzza, I think is having a smashing tournament. I think he's a great lock forward. I think he's a brilliant player. Like Lamaro in the back row. And then you consider like the players. Who's the young that I can't his name escapes me right now, the young winger who's absolutely tearing up trees for
Gacy.
Italy. Yeah, Italy's under 20s. Like
Oh, the under 20s. Oh, jeez, I can't think either. I was thinking Zebra there and Gacy. I can't
yeah,
think
but
of the under
Gacy and
20.
even Zebre, like, like Zebre, independent of that, like you look at their they have another winger. Oh, sorry, he's Argentinian. Never mind that. But there's a lot of like, the Italy under 20s beat their French counterparts. Like there's a lot of promising things happening in terms of Italian rugby, and I generally think like Italy were an interpretation of the laws away from winning that game today. And also Dante was as clear cut a red card as I've ever seen. It was such a stupid challenge. He made no effort to dip. He deserved to be red carded for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We usually touch on the following round in some degree, so I might just really quickly. We'll talk about Ireland against England massively in another podcast in a week and a half's time. So, Craig, Scotland go to Rome next. You'd imagine Scotland will win, but what do you think you should be looking for from Scotland in that game?
For me, Scotland should dominate and not take the foot off Italy's throat. And this has been our biggest problem. We come up, a lot of the times you just talked about it there, Eric. Saying that when you go to Italy, usually that's when the guys who have been on the bench all the way through the tournament get their starts. And this is where we go to Italy and we take the team that have just beaten England, and we put the team on and we score, have a fantastic first half, score a barrel load of points, and then we come on to the second half and we score another barrel load of points. I think that's what I would like to see from Scotland, just because it's not a natural Scottish thing to do. The Scotland that we know will go and they'll, especially Italy are always well known for the Scots to be the people we trip over. We went down to Wales 2-3 years ago to a poor Wales team thinking we're going to beat them, and we tripped over them. And that's where we have to, go to Italy and absolutely slap them around. And if we don't do that, I think the Scottish fans will not be convinced just yet that we're going to be coming to Ireland to give to give a good account of ourselves.
And Eric, the other game that doesn't involve Ireland is France traveling to Cardiff, and it really feels like that could be a tight game if the trajectory of both of these sides is continued in round four.
Like, you just don't know. You genuinely don't know like what France team is going to show up. Like, France have a habit of following up like a really terrible performance with a really good one, or at least a winning one. Like, you saw that the way they bounced back from being hockeyed at home by Ireland, going over to Murrayfield and getting a win. It genuinely wouldn't surprise me now for France to follow up like an absolutely turgid performance against Italy, by going over to Wales and getting a win, especially when like Dante will more than likely miss that match. Given the way
Yeah.
he's been playing, that's not the worst thing to happen for that French side.
Oh,
The one thing I will say about Wales is like you'd hope that like the one game they've had in Cardiff so far this year, like they very very nearly brought it back in the second half against Scotland, albeit Scotland were probably unlucky to not score that try and put a bit more of a glass on the scoreline at the end of it. But Cardiff is always a really, really tough place to go for any team. So as much as I want to kind of like try and make a prediction either way, like honestly, if I was to make a prediction, I would say that I think France are going to win it just because of France's tendency to follow up poor performances with good performances, and the blessing in disguise of Dante missing this game. But I just think France has been so disorganized, and Wales have been just a step or two away from their own level of organization. But I think if Wales can do to France what they couldn't do against Ireland and disrupt the breakdown effectively, I think Wales are going to make a difficult day of it for the French.
I'd agree. I'd agree with both you and your predictions on that, and we'll have a full show looking ahead to Ireland against England in Twickenham. So we'll leave that for then. Finally, though, we said we talk about it, so we will. Ireland under 20s now made it 3 wins from 3 and 13 in a row in the championship on Friday night as they brushed aside Wales 43-8, thanks to tries from Sean Adogbo, Hugh Gavin, Henry Walker, Ben O'Connor, and 2 from Danny Sheehan. Eric, this we'll just use this to wrap off the show. Hard to argue the result. It was definitely one-way traffic in the second half. The first half was more patchy, but who or what stood out for you from Friday night?
I think what stands out for me, Kaelan, is the number of players in that team that appear tailor-made for professional rugby. And like I remember a couple of years ago during, I think it was that weird COVID under-20 Six Nations where all the games were played in Cardiff, and Alex Kendellen was kind of like manfully trying to drag the Ireland team through that championship, and I think we finished around third or fourth in the table. But if you look at the likes of, say, like Ben O'Connor, looks tailor made for professional rugby. Like, give him another year or two of pro S&C inside the Munster setup, and like just watch him fly. Hugh Gavin, like, that literally looks like boys against men with Hugh Gavin playing. Like, he's a ridiculously strong player. Sean
Brian
Adogbo.
Gleeson is injured. We should probably throw his name in there.
But sure, Brian Gleeson probably shouldn't even be playing 20s this year. Like, that's a cheat
Yeah,
code. But Sean Adogbo, like, the funny thing about Sean Adogbo is Sean Adogbo was one of those players that Mark Sexton didn't like. And then Mark Sexton went to Connacht. And then the Munster under-20s played the Ireland under-20s in the friendly. And Sean Adogbo made an absolute fool of the Ireland under-20s playing for the Munster under-20s. So got called back in and is now showing exactly why he deserves to get called back in. And like, the elevator pitch for Sean Adogbo is Edwin Adogbo, but fast. And that's
yeah,
like a terrifying prospect. But look, it's going to be interesting to see with that 20s team in particular next season, if Richie Murphy ends up getting the Ulster gig full time, who's going to step in. Genuinely wouldn't surprise me to see Ian Keatley get the job.
yeah.
Forgive
Very,
me,
very well liked. I know a couple of lads in
hugely well,
Bows.
hugely well liked, and very, very popular in the youth and kind of like community game setup. Um, but as he said, what stood out to me on the Ireland side was the amount of lads that were tailor made for rugby. What stood out to me on the Welsh side, and Craig, you kind of spoke about the problems that are besieging Welsh rugby at the moment with, the lack of money there for professional players, and the mismanagement of the game in terms of like the overt focus on the amateur club game without a pathway into professional rugby. That's very much manifesting itself in Welsh underage teams in the last couple of years. And unfortunately, certainly from last year anyway, Scottish underage teams as well. Like, it's very, very sad to see the like lack of competition there. There are some great results, like we talked about how Italy are very much on the up and up this season in the under-20s, but Wales were poor enough for a finish.
Yeah, they were. Ireland traveled to the wreck. We won't have time to preview this in 2 weeks' time. So just on that, they traveled to the wreck to play England. It's a very highly regarded English side. I understand you might have seen a lot of them. It feels like that'll be tough, but as you said about the Scotland under-20s team, they win that, you feel like it's three in a row of the Grand Slams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the English, like, if they can get past England, then yes, I think they'll kind of comfortably get past Scotland. And it's a phenomenal, as much as like we might slag Richie Murphy picking his own son at out half, and picking one of his Pres Bray teammates out in the wing. It's not, like, the results speak for themselves. So like, I can be as snarky about his selection policies as I want, but if he's delivering three back, but then again, you have to kind of ask yourself, it's like, is the goal at that level winning trophies, or is it player development?
The problem is the Scottish under-20s are doing neither of them, and that's the problem we have. And I think, just to touch on what we're talking about Wales, we had what we thought was a pathway to get our under-20 players playing higher level rugby, and we've just binned it. So, and we're going back to the amateur style game, bringing them through that way, and then playing the sort of the regions sort of rugby. We'll have to see, but again, that's going to be another 4 to 5 years in development to see if we can bring them through. It's a really difficult situation, and currently Scottish age grade at this moment in time is a bit of a bin fire as well at the moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case, and might be something we might get onto in a podcast down the line. But it is a pity how it's become a three-horse race in recent years. And when you think about it, and without being too crude about it, Ireland, their teams are heavily supported by the wealth system in the Dublin private schools. That's the backbone of the team. France just have so many teams churning out some of the best academies in the world. England, kind of the same. Academy wise, has never been their issue. And college and universities teams are very, very good as well. Italy have made progress, but Scotland and Wales have regressed in that matter, and that's why we're seeing it like this. And hopefully it does change, but unfortunately, these things take time. But lads, we'll leave it at that for tonight. I know we ran long, but it was a really, really enjoyable show. Always great to get an external perspective from yourself, Craig, and Eric. Always good to have you on as well. And I'll be back during the week with an interview with former Munster half Johnny Holland. So stay tuned for that. It's a really insightful interview. I think it's well worth a listen. But as always, thanks home to everyone for listening and to the lads for joining me. If you like what you see or hear, please do subscribe, like, leave a review. It all makes a huge difference, and really appreciate all the feedback we've been getting this tournament. So thank you very much for that. You can find all our links down below. But for now, and until next time, take it easy.